I have the task of talking about office, so we'll run through it. I thought about having one slide, which is the kid from Home Alone holding his face and screaming, but I thought that might be too much. Big picture about office, just some macro things we continue to focus on, and that's there continues to be a densification of knowledge workers, not only sort of in Houston but across the country. And we used to think technology would disperse knowledge workers, and actually the opposite has happened. And so you see, more concentration in fewer places. We do see more and more now people thinking about office space as a tool and a resource and not just a cost, meaning how does office space help people with their business and their brand, recruiting and retention. Amenities and connectivity are critically important. I think a standalone office building on a freeway gets more and more challenging, and we're seeing some of these dynamics play out right now in the office market, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Rapid obsolescence of product, really because of the prior three things I mentioned. I think as an industry, we haven't necessarily come to grips with how quickly some product is becoming obsolescent. Business clarity and flexibility, long-term in office, I think this is a really big issue as landlords we have to think about is I think people are going to want more flexibility in terms of shrinking or growing and lease terms. I think the days of people signing 10, 15-year leases with absolute, conviction about what their needs are, I think that's challenging. And so you're starting to see things like co-working environments come on. And we used to think co-working environments, that's just for the creative class. Now you see people like Deloitte and Touche and people signing strategic contracts with co-working environments so they can have complete flexibility for their workforce across the world and across the nation. So those are some of the big things that we're just thinking about from a macro perspective. Last 2 years, so we got 14 in the bottom right, 15 top right, and 16 there on the left. This is sort of a market clock that JLL puts out, and you can see kind of what's happened is, all the dots are basically sliding all the way around to a falling market, and I think we know that, but for the most part, occupancy and rates have a lot of downward pressure. Some general market stats, and again, this is from JLL. So you see the absorption, as Alan said, we kind of went through, 08, 09 in the financial crisis. We actually had negative absorption in 09. Then we had a really robust growth period, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then last year was pretty much flat, and then this year we've seen pretty strong negative absorption. And as you can see, our vacancy rate has popped up. Historical for Houston's kind of somewhere in the 12 to 13 range, and we're up at 20, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then for the first time in a long time, really since 11, we've seen downward pressure on rates. I think the biggest thing about rates is just, with vacancy, what are landlords willing to do? Do they want to hold rates and not worry about occupancy, or do they want to lower rates and fight for occupancy? And I think that's somewhat landlord dependent, somewhat capital dependent, and somewhat dependent on sort of your view. Are you you're a long-term holder, or are you a short-term seller? So development pipeline, this is sort of the same map I've shown for the last 2 years. So again, you got 14, 15, and 16. So you can see a pretty drastic reduction in the pipeline from over 40 buildings to 27 to 12. That reduction is twofold. Some of it's projects completing, some are projects that never got started, were projected to start and never got started. So this is from HFF. So basically in each of the large submarkets going sort of east to west, you've got, one or two buildings where it used to be, you could look at the energy corridor west, so meaning west of the Beltway. I mean, we had 12 buildings at one point, so. All right, so my marketing team said you absolutely cannot put all this on a slide. It breaks every rule, but I did it anyway. So what I want you to look at is the development pipeline has been rolling out since 15, 16, and now looking into 17. We always quoted these percent lease numbers, and it always sounded really good. So in 15, we said, what's in the pipeline is 77% leased. And so if you look at that column sort of with the navy boxes there, the top number is when you take all buildings, what we quoted as leased. But then you take out the big build-to-suits. So in 15, you take out Exxon, ConocoPhillips, Noble, Shell. Those were all 100% leased, really build-to-suit buildings. So that 77, actually, without those 100% deals in there, was 59%. And now look at what happens when we go 16 and 17. 84 goes to 25%, 51 goes to 25, and 49 goes to 33. So on the 10 million square feet in the pipeline, that total at the bottom, we've actually leased about half of it. So we have, 5 million feet that we still need to absorb. Now the very bottom piece is, to me, this is sort of the interesting piece. If you take direct vacancy, which is about, and this is Class A, I took out Class B, is a little over 7 million feet, so it represents 7% of the market. And then you put that 5 million feet that still need to be leased out of the pipeline, you get about 12 million feet, right? So that would put us at 12% vacancy, which would be right at our historical average. What has radically changed the market is the other 8 million square feet of sublease space that has now come on the market, created another 8% of vacancy, which has pushed us to 20% vacancy. And the subleases, as we all know, has largely been driven by the oil and gas business. Absorbed huge amounts of space in the uptick of energy prices, and now they're giving back, and it's just not little space. I mean, it's full floors and big chunks, so it's 100,000 square feet, 200,000 square feet, and so that's what's creating a lot of the issue. If you look, right, by sublease space, in Class A and Class B, and the bulk of what the energy companies are in is Class A space. Look at the energy corridor west on the far left. I mean, it's a third of the total sublease, and then you've got downtown and West Chase, and so those are the three predominant submarkets where the energy business is concentrated. One of the things about sublease is sort of what is the sublease space? It's not all homogeneous, and so this is sort of looking at time remaining on subleases. And so when you look on the far left, there's a big chunk of it that has 5 years or less on remaining on the sublease. And so what you have to ask yourself, is that really attractive to somebody? Meaning, would I go and lease space with, say, 3 years left on the term? I probably wouldn't. So you kind of take that chunk of space and go, is that really competitive? Now, the flip side of that is, in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, all that could go back to the landlord when the lease expires, and so then it becomes direct vacancy. And so, but it's interesting to get a little more granular and not just say it's all sublease space and it's all the same, and it's not. So then a little bit about mixed use, and so these are some of the more predominant projects. You got Boulevard Place, obviously there with Whole Foods. It has office space. You have River Oaks District. It has office space. Kirby Collection just coming out of the ground. I think it has 187,000 feet, if I remember. City Center, our project, we have about 650,000 feet of office. Green Street, Kirby Grove that we just opened. You got Metro National's Memorial City with a lot of office space. Memorial Green, one of our projects, and then Hughes Landing. What's interesting, if you look across all these projects and sort of highlighting, one of the first things we talked about was importance of access to amenities and connectivity, is all of these projects are seeing pretty good leasing activity. And so in a market, a lot of people ask us, well, why do you develop mixed use? And we're just a huge believer in differentiation, have something to offer that not everybody else has to offer. And we think there's upside in that, but from an investment standpoint, there's also real protection from downside. And I think that's what we're seeing in the market, where, a lot of buildings have literally no activity. I think all these projects are either leased. So Boulevard is I think 100% leased. River Oaks is 100% leased. Kirby Collection, they're just starting, but I know they're seeing activity. City Center, 4 of our buildings are 100% leased. The 5th one, City Center 5, that we delivered last year, is 75% leased, still seeing good activity. Kirby Grove's the same way. If you look at vacancy, City Center and Memorial City are an interesting example. The market research folks have now actually divided the market between Energy Corridor West, so west of the Beltway, which is predominantly all the energy companies, and then Energy Corridor or East, which is predominantly us and Metro National. And the reason being is you see two very different things going on in terms of the market.